What happens when one of Hollywood's most respected humanitarian advocates comes face to face with a talk show host who thinks he can cross any line for a laugh? Tonight, we're diving into the explosive confrontation that left audiences gasping, producers scrambling, and one A-list actress walking off stage. This is the story of how Jimmy Kimmel pushed Angelina Jolie too far, and what happened when she finally had enough. But before we get into this incredible breakdown, make sure to hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below telling me which celebrity interview moment shocked you the most. Trust me, you're going to want to stick around for every single word of this story. The stage was set like any other Tuesday night on Jimmy Kimmel Live. The familiar blue backdrop glowed under the studio lights. The audience chatted excitedly in their seats, and Jimmy Kimmel prepared for what was supposed to be a routine promotional interview. Angelina Jolie was scheduled to discuss her latest directorial project, a powerful drama about war refugees that had been generating Oscar buzz. It should have been straightforward, professional, even inspiring. Instead, it became one of the most uncomfortable television moments in recent memory. Angelina walked onto the stage with her characteristic poise, wearing an elegant black blazer and maintaining the composed demeanor that had made her one of Hollywood's most respected figures. The audience erupted in applause as she took her seat across from Kimmel, who was already wearing that mischievous grin that regular viewers knew meant trouble was brewing. "Angelina Jolie, everybody," Kimmel announced to the crowd, his voice carrying that familiar tone of practiced enthusiasm. "Thank you so much for being here tonight." "Thank you for having me, Jimmy," Angelina replied with a polite smile, settling into her chair and crossing her legs. There was nothing in her demeanor to suggest she was prepared for what was coming. Kimmel launched into his usual opening banter, asking about her flight to Los Angeles and making small talk about the weather. But those who knew his interviewing style could sense he was building up to something. There was an energy in his voice, a barely contained excitement that suggested he had something planned that went beyond the standard promotional questions. "So, your new film," Kimmel began, leaning back in his chair with a casual air. "It deals with some pretty heavy subject matter: refugees, war zones, human suffering. I have to ask, and forgive me if this sounds insensitive, but don't you think audiences are getting a little tired of being lectured to by Hollywood celebrities about world problems?" The question hung in the air like a loaded weapon. Angelina's expression shifted almost imperceptibly, her professional smile tightening just slightly around the edges. She had dealt with challenging questions before, but there was something in Kimmel's tone that suggested this wasn't going to be a respectful debate about the role of celebrity activism. "I wouldn't call it lecturing, Jimmy," she replied carefully, her voice maintaining its measured tone. "I think storytelling has always been about helping people understand experiences different from their own. When you've spent time with refugee families, when you've seen children who have lost everything, you feel a responsibility to share those stories." Right, Kimmel nodded, but his expression suggested he wasn't really listening to her answer. "But here's what I'm curious about. You're worth, what, $120 million? You live in mansions around the world. Don't you think it's a little hypocritical to make movies about poverty and suffering while you're flying around in private jets?" The audience began to shift uncomfortably in their seats. This wasn't the playful teasing that Kimmel was known for. There was a sharp edge to his words that felt more like an attack than an interview question. Angelina's posture straightened, and for the first time since sitting down, she looked directly into Kimmel's eyes with an intensity that seemed to pierce right through him. "I think that's an unfair characterization," she said, her voice remaining steady but gaining a subtle steel underneath. "The work I do with the UN, the foundation work, the advocacy, that's not something I do from a mansion. That's work I do in refugee camps, in war zones, in places where people are dying. And yes, I'm privileged to have resources that allow me to do that work. I use that privilege to amplify voices that otherwise wouldn't be heard." Kimmel chuckled, and it was not a warm sound. "Come on, though. Let's be honest here. These humanitarian trips, they're basically very expensive photo opportunities, aren't they? You show up, take some pictures with poor kids, maybe shed a tear for the cameras, then fly back to your comfortable life and feel good about yourself." The words landed like a slap across the face. Angelina's composure cracked for just a moment, her eyes flashing with something that looked dangerously close to fury. The audience was now completely silent, sensing that they were witnessing something that had gone far beyond entertainment into genuinely uncomfortable territory. Excuse me? Angelina's voice was quiet, but there was a warning in it that anyone paying attention would have heeded immediately. But Jimmy Kimmel, perhaps intoxicated by what he perceived as good television, pressed forward. I mean, you have to admit there's something a little performative about it all. The timing always seems to coincide with when you have a movie to promote. It's smart marketing, really. Wrap yourself in humanitarian causes, and suddenly nobody can criticize your actual work without seeming heartless. Jimmy, Angelina said, and now her voice carried a tone that made it clear she was giving him one last chance to change course. I think you should be very careful about the assumptions you're making. Why? Kimmel shot back, his confidence apparently growing with each passing moment. Are you going to have me investigated by the UN? It was meant to be a joke, but it fell flat in the deadly silence of the studio. Angelina stared at him for a long moment, and in that silence, everyone present seemed to realize that something was about to happen that would change the entire trajectory of the evening. No, Jimmy, Angelina said, her voice now carrying a deadly calm that somehow felt more threatening than if she had been shouting. But I might just walk off this stage if you continue to mock the suffering of people I've held in my arms while they were dying. The threat should have been enough to make any reasonable host pump the brakes, but Kimmel seemed oblivious to the danger he was courting. Instead, he laughed. Actually laughed. As if the idea of Angelina Jolie having genuine human emotions about her humanitarian work was somehow absurd. Oh, come on, don't be so dramatic, he said, waving his hand dismissively. We're just having a conversation here. I thought you Hollywood types were supposed to be tough. Can't handle a little pushback? Pushback? Angelina repeated, and now there was no mistaking the ice in her voice. Is that what you call belittling the work that organizations around the world do to save lives? Is that what you call mocking children who have watched their parents murdered in front of them? I'm not mocking children, Kimmel protested, but his tone suggested he was still treating this as some kind of game. I'm questioning whether flying around the world on publicity tours really helps them. And honestly, getting this defensive about it kind of proves my point. That was the moment. That was the exact second when Angelina Jolie's legendary composure finally shattered completely. She stood up so quickly that her chair rolled backward, and when she spoke, her voice cut through the studio silence like a blade. You want to talk about defensiveness, Jimmy? Let's talk about a talk show host who thinks human suffering is material for comedy bits. Let's talk about someone so desperate for viral moments that he'll attack humanitarian work just to get a reaction. You want to know what's really performative? This entire conversation, the audience was frozen. Camera operators didn't know where to point their lenses. Producers in the control room were frantically trying to figure out whether to cut to commercial or let this play out. Kimmel, for the first time since the interview began, seemed to realize that he might have miscalculated. Look, I think maybe you're taking this a little too personally, he said, trying to inject some levity back into his voice. I'm just playing devil's advocate here. Isn't that what good journalism is supposed to do? Journalism? Angelina's laugh was sharp and humorless. You think this is journalism? You think ambushing a guest with personal attacks disguised as questions is journalism? You haven't asked me a single substantive question about the film, about the refugees whose stories we're telling, about anything that actually matters. All you've done is try to tear down work that has helped save actual human lives. I asked about the film, Kimmel protested weakly. No, you made accusations about the film. There's a difference. You accused me of exploitation before you even bothered to learn what the film is about. You've turned an interview about people seeking safety and shelter into an attack on my character. And you know what the really sick part is? You're doing it for entertainment. You're using human tragedy as a setup for your punchlines. The studio was so quiet you could hear the hum of the air conditioning. Kimmel shifted uncomfortably in his chair, finally seeming to understand that he was in over his head. But instead of backing down gracefully, he doubled down with the desperation of someone who knew he was losing control. I think you're being a little unfair here, he said. I'm just asking the questions that people at home are thinking. Not everyone can afford to fly around the world playing savior. Some of us have to work real jobs. The words were barely out of his mouth before Angelina was leaning forward, her voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried more power than any shout could have. Real jobs? Jimmy, I've spent the last 15 years working with refugees, with victims of violence, with children who have been trafficked and sold. I've sat with mothers who have buried their children, with fathers who have watched their families torn apart by war. I've helped draft legislation, raised millions of dollars for aid organizations, and used whatever platform I have to bring attention to crises that the media ignores. And you want to call that fake work? That's not what I said, Kimmel mumbled, but even he seemed to know how weak his protest sounded. That's exactly what you said. You called it performative. You called it photo opportunities. You reduced years of genuine advocacy and real impact to a marketing scheme. And you know what? Even if you were right, even if every single thing I've done was just for show, at least I'm using my platform to talk about something more meaningful than celebrity gossip and viral videos. Kimmel's face was flushed now, sweat beginning to bead on his forehead under the hot studio lights. He looked like a man who was finally beginning to understand that he had picked the wrong target and chosen the wrong day to do it. Look, maybe we got off on the wrong foot here, he said, attempting damage control. Why don't we start over? Tell me about the film. But Angelina was shaking her head before he even finished the sentence. No, Jimmy. You don't get to do that. You don't get to spend 10 minutes attacking everything I care about and then pretend like we can just reset and have a normal conversation. You've shown exactly who you are and what you think of the work that means everything to me. There's no coming back from that. I was just trying to ask tough questions, Kimmel said, his voice now carrying a pleading quality that suggested he was finally grasping the magnitude of his mistake. Tough questions? Jimmy, a tough question would be asking about the challenges of making a film in refugee camps. A tough question would be asking about the ethical considerations of telling other people's stories. A tough question would be asking about the political obstacles to getting aid to people who need it. What you did wasn't tough questioning. It was character assassination disguised as journalism. The silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity. Angelina stood there, her chest rising and falling with controlled anger, while Kimmel sat frozen in his chair like a deer caught in headlights. The audience didn't dare make a sound, sensing that they were witnessing something that would be talked about for years to come. Finally, Kimmel broke the silence with what might have been the most tone-deaf response of the entire evening. Well, I mean, this is live television. Things get heated sometimes. That's just show business, right? The words hit Angelina like a physical blow. Her eyes widened with genuine disbelief. And when she spoke, her voice carried a fury that made everything she had said before sound gentle by comparison. Show business? Show business? Jimmy, you just spent the last 15 minutes attacking my life's work, questioning my integrity, and mocking the suffering of refugees, and your response is that it's just show business? Do you hear yourself right now? Do you have any idea what you just said? Kimmel seemed to shrink in his chair, but he couldn't seem to stop himself from making it worse. I just think maybe you're taking this a little too seriously. We're entertainers. This is entertainment. No, Jimmy, you're an entertainer. I'm an actress who also happens to spend half her life in refugee camps trying to help people who have lost everything. And you know what? Even if I were just an entertainer, that wouldn't give you the right to ambush me with personal attacks and then dismiss my reaction as me taking things too seriously. She began pacing now, her controlled composure completely abandoned as the full weight of her anger poured out. You want to know what entertainment is, Jimmy? Entertainment is making people laugh without tearing down the work that saves lives. Entertainment is creating joy without causing harm. What you've done tonight isn't entertainment. It's cruelty disguised as comedy. Look, I think we should probably take a commercial break, Kimmel said desperately, looking toward the production crew for salvation. Oh no, Angelina said, turning to face him with an expression that could have melted steel. You don't get to run away to commercial now. You started this conversation, and by God, we're going to finish it. You wanted tough questions? Let me ask you one. When was the last time you used your platform for something more meaningful than making fun of people? When was the last time you talked about anything that actually mattered? Kimmel opened his mouth to respond, but Angelina wasn't done. I'll tell you when. Never. You've built an entire career on cheap shots and easy targets. You punch down at people who can't fight back, and when someone finally stands up to you, you act like they're the problem. You want to question my work? Fine. But what work of yours should I be questioning? The audience was transfixed. This wasn't just a celebrity meltdown. This was a master class in righteous anger, delivered by someone who had clearly been pushed beyond her breaking point. Kimmel looked like he wanted to disappear entirely. "I help people too," he said weakly. "I do charity work." "What charity work?" Angelina shot back immediately. "Name one refugee camp you've visited. Name one piece of legislation you've helped draft. Name one child whose life you've personally helped save. I'm waiting." The silence was deafening. Kimmel's mouth moved, but no words came out. It was clear to everyone watching that he had nothing, absolutely nothing, to offer in response. "That's what I thought," Angelina continued. "You sit in this comfortable studio making millions of dollars by mocking people who actually do things that matter. You've never held a dying child in your arms. You've never sat with a mother who's lost everything. You've never seen what war actually does to families. But you feel qualified to judge the people who have." "I never said I was judging," Kimmel protested, but his voice was barely above a whisper. "Every word out of your mouth tonight has been a judgment. Every question has been an accusation. You've questioned my motives, my integrity, and my commitment to work that has consumed the better part of 2 decades of my life. And now you want to pretend like you weren't judging? Are you serious right now?" Kimmel looked desperately toward his producers again, but Angelina wasn't finished. She walked closer to his desk, her voice dropping to that dangerous whisper again. "You know what the really pathetic part is, Jimmy? I came here tonight genuinely excited to talk about this film. I wanted to tell people about the refugees whose stories we're sharing, about the incredible resilience of families who have survived unimaginable trauma, about the organizations doing life-saving work that desperately need support. Instead, you turned it into a personal attack because you thought it would make for better television." "The film," Kimmel said suddenly, grasping at straws. "We can still talk about the film." Angelina laughed, and it was the most bitter sound anyone in that studio had ever heard. "Now you want to talk about the film? After spending 20 minutes trying to destroy my credibility? After questioning everything I've dedicated my life to? You think you can just flip a switch and suddenly become a legitimate interviewer?" She shook her head slowly, her expression shifting from fury to something that looked almost like pity. "You know what, Jimmy? I feel sorry for you. I really do. Because this is what your life has become. This is what you think success looks like. Sitting in a chair, making money by trying to tear down people who are actually trying to make the world a better place. That's not fair," Kimmel said, but even he seemed to know how hollow the protest sounded. "Fair?" Angelina repeated. "You want to talk about fair? Is it fair that there are 65 million refugees in the world right now, and instead of using your platform to talk about that crisis, you use it to attack the people trying to help? Is it fair that children are dying in camps while you sit here making jokes about the people trying to save them?" She straightened up, smoothing down her blazer and composing herself with visible effort. When she spoke again, her voice had regained some of its earlier calm, but the steel underneath was unmistakable. "I'm done here, Jimmy. I'm done with this conversation. I'm done with this interview. And I'm done pretending that what you do here qualifies as journalism. You want a show? You want viral content? Congratulations. You just got it. But you'll get it without me." She turned toward the audience, her expression softening slightly as she addressed them directly. "To everyone here tonight, I want you to know that the film we made isn't about me. It's about families who have shown incredible courage in the face of unimaginable loss. If you want to learn about their stories, if you want to understand what real strength looks like, I hope you'll see it. But you won't hear about it from this show." She turned back to Kimmel one last time, and her final words cut through the studio air like a blade. "And Jimmy, the next time you want to question someone's humanitarian work, maybe try doing some of your own first. Maybe then you'll understand why it matters." With that, Angelina Jolie walked off the Jimmy Kimmel Live stage, leaving behind a stunned audience, a humiliated host, and what would undoubtedly become one of the most talked-about television moments of the year. Kimmel sat there in the aftermath, his face pale and his hands visibly shaking, finally understanding the true cost of using cruelty as entertainment. And there you have it. The complete breakdown of how Jimmy Kimmel's attempt to create viral content backfired spectacularly when he chose to target someone who actually fights for people who can't fight for themselves. What did you think of Angelina's response? Did she go too far? Or was Kimmel completely out of line? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Hit that subscribe button for more incredible celebrity moments. And let me know which other interview explosions you want me to break down next.